Introduction to Medieval Crime and Punishment. The medieval period, encompassing the Anglo-Saxon era, Norman England, and later medieval times, saw a dynamic landscape of crime and punishment. Throughout these centuries, certain actions like theft and murder were consistently regarded as crimes, reflecting fundamental societal norms. A crime is defined as any activity that breaks a law, with laws being established by the governing authorities. In Anglo-Saxon times, powerful and wealthy individuals primarily created laws, and crimes threatening their authority were met with severe penalties. The severity of the punishment directly correlated with the seriousness of the crime committed. The primary aims of medieval punishment were retribution, ensuring the criminals suffered for their actions, deterrence, to prevent both the offender and others from committing similar crimes, and keeping people safe by removing or incapacitating dangerous individuals. These core objectives remained consistent, though the methods of achieving them evolved significantly over time. Anglo-Saxon punishments and wergild. During the Anglo-Saxon period, fines and compensation were the most prevalent forms of punishment. The system of wergild, a form of victim compensation, was widely used for many crimes, including murder. This system aimed to prevent blood feuds by providing a financial alternative to violent retribution. The wergild amount varied significantly based on the victim's social status. A noble's life commanded a much higher wergild than that of a serf. For instance, the wergild for a king could be thousands of shillings, while that for a common freeman might be only a fraction of that, highlighting the deeply stratified nature of Anglo-Saxon society. While corporal punishments, such as mutilation or flogging, were also common, capital punishment was rarely employed. This reflected a societal preference for compensation and physical deterrence over execution, aiming to maintain social cohesion and productivity within communities. Norman punishments and forest laws. Following the Norman conquest in 1066, there was a dramatic increase in the use of capital and corporal punishments. Many more offences became capital crimes, reflecting William I's desire to assert his authority and control over the newly conquered land. The introduction of the forest laws in 1072, which declared vast areas of England as royal forest for hunting, led to particularly harsh punishments for infringements. Breaking these laws, such as poaching or taking wood, could result in severe penalties, including blinding, castration, or even hanging. This was a stark contrast to Anglo-Saxon practices and caused widespread resentment among the common people who relied on these lands for survival. The wergild system was abolished under Norman rule, with fines now paid directly to the monarch rather than the victim's family. This shift centralized power and revenue, further solidifying the king's authority and diminishing the community's role in justice. Even minor crimes, however, could still be punished with fines, whipping, or time in the stocks. Later medieval punishment trends. In the later medieval period, there was a gradual decrease in the use of capital punishment. Although crimes against authority, such as treason or rebellion, continued to be punished with extreme harshness. This shift might reflect a growing preference for alternative forms of control and punishment. Corporal punishments remained widely used, serving as a visible deterrent and a means of public shaming. However, juries often became reluctant to convict their neighbors for minor offenses, especially if it meant a severe punishment, leading to a more nuanced application of justice. Fines became increasingly common again, often serving as a primary punishment for less serious crimes. This re-emphasis on fines provided a flexible means of punishment that could be adapted to the severity of the offense and the social standing of the offender, while also generating revenue for local authorities or the crown. Social status and punishment disparities. Medieval punishments were not applied uniformly across all members of society. They varied significantly based on an individual's class and gender. Nobles and clergy, for instance, often received different treatment compared to commoners, reflecting the deeply entrenched social hierarchy of the time. A prime example of this disparity was the wergild system in Anglo-Saxon times, where the compensation amount for a victim's death was directly tied to their social status. The wergild for a noble was a substantial sum, whereas for a serf it was considerably less, underscoring the unequal value placed on lives across the social spectrum. During the later medieval period, this inequality persisted. While commoners convicted of murder were typically hanged, nobles found guilty of the same crime were often beheaded. This distinction in execution methods served to maintain social distinctions even in death, reinforcing the idea that noble blood was treated differently even when facing the ultimate penalty. The Church's influence on punishment. Throughout the medieval period, the Church wielded immense power and played a pivotal role in defining what constituted a crime, how trials were conducted, and what punishments were administered. Its influence extended beyond spiritual matters into the very fabric of the legal system. The Church established its own courts, which primarily dealt with moral crimes such as adultery or blasphemy, and offences against church rights. These ecclesiastical courts operated parallel to secular courts, often offering more lenient sentences, as the Church's primary aim was the reform and salvation of the sinner, rather than solely retribution. This dual system of justice meant that individuals could sometimes choose which court to face, depending on the nature of their crime and their social standing. The Church's emphasis on reform introduced a different philosophy into the punitive landscape, aiming to guide criminals towards repentance and a changed life. Benefit of clergy and its implications. Benefit as clergy was a significant legal privilege in medieval England, allowing members of the clergy to be tried in church courts rather than secular ones. This was highly advantageous because church courts generally imposed more lenient punishments, focusing on penance and spiritual reform rather than harsh physical penalties or execution. To claim benefit of clergy, an accused person had to prove they were a cleric, typically by reading a passage from the Bible, often Psalm 51, known as the neck verse. As literacy was rare, especially among commoners, this test effectively limited the privilege to those with some education, primarily priests and monks, though many criminals memorized the verse to exploit the loophole. The existence of benefit of clergy highlighted the profound inequality within the medieval justice system. It provided a distinct pathway for certain individuals to receive preferential treatment, creating a two-tiered system where social status and literacy could significantly alter the outcome of a trial. Notably, this privilege was not extended to women, as they were not permitted to be priests at the time. Sanctuary and its role in justice. Sanctuary offered protection from the law to accused criminals who sought refuge in certain designated churches. This ancient right allowed individuals to escape immediate arrest and prosecution by entering a consecrated space, providing a temporary reprieve from secular justice. Upon claiming sanctuary, the church priest would report the crime, but no one was permitted to arrest the accused within the church grounds. The individual then had a choice: either surrender to the secular court for trial or swear an oath to leave the country permanently within 40 days, becoming an outlaw if they failed to depart. The concept of sanctuary, much like benefit of clergy, demonstrated how the church operated an alternative justice system that sometimes circumvented secular authority. It provided a unique pathway for individuals to negotiate their fate, highlighting the complex interplay between religious and state power in medieval England. Many churches, particularly larger cathedrals, served as places of sanctuary. Trial by ordeal, divine judgment. Trial by ordeal was an ancient method of determining guilt or innocence, primarily used when a jury could not reach a verdict. It was deeply rooted in the belief that God would intervene to reveal the truth, making the outcome a divine judgment rather than a human one. This practice was common in Anglo-Saxon times and persisted into the early 13th century. Various methods of ordeal existed. The ordeal by hot water or iron involved the accused plunging their hand into boiling water or grasping a hot iron. If the wound healed cleanly within a set period, usually 3 days, the person was deemed innocent. Conversely, if it festered, guilt was presumed. This was a physically grueling and often dangerous test. Another method was the ordeal by cold water, where the accused was tied and thrown into consecrated water. If they sank, they were considered innocent, as the pure water was believed to accept them. If they floated, they were deemed guilty, as the water rejected them. For priests, the ordeal by consecrated bread involved eating a piece of bread. Choking was seen as a sign of guilt. These trials were officially abolished by the Pope in 1215, as the Church began to move away from such superstitious practices.